Welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is Monday, so we're going to be talking about the top performers from the Week 5. And these are going to be all the games that happened before today, obviously. So these are all the Sunday games and the Thursday night game. Top 5 performers at each position. Without further ado, let's get into it. So at the quarterback position, Patrick Mahomes is the leader so far. He honestly didn't have that great a game by his standards. He went 22 out of 43, so about 50% completion percentage, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 21 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown as well. Ended up with 33.7 fantasy points. These are all going to be 6-point passing touchdown leagues as well. If you're like in a 4-point passing touchdown league, just adjust accordingly. Then next up we had Ryan Fitzpatrick. He had a very efficient day, 22 out of 28 against San Francisco 49ers. 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 16 yards rushing on the ground. 33.6 points, so he's number 2 so far. And then we had Deshaun Watson, 25 out of 35, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. And he chipped in with 25 rushing yards. One of the things to notice about him is he has not been running the ball quite as much this year. We'll have to see if that changes in the next couple of weeks. You know, Bill O'Brien out now. Might change a little bit of how they do some of the play calling. And then he had 30.86 fantasy points. Then we got Russell Wilson, played last night, 20 out of 32, so not his best efficiency game, 217 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he also chipped in with 58 rushing yards. He ended up with 30.48 fantasy points. Russell Wilson's been great this year, top 5 quarterback every week, so you're starting him every week regardless. Most of these guys on here, Mahomes, Watson, Wilson, you're pretty much starting every week. Fitzpatrick's pretty much matchup dependent, but even then, sometimes he's a little hit or miss. Like sometimes it's like you think he's going to have the good massive matchup like last week against Seattle, then he throws 2 picks. Then the 49ers might not have been like the greatest matchup in the world, even though they're very banged up on defense. Then he comes out and he throws his 3 touchdowns. So you just got to be careful with him if you're streaming. And then last but not least for the top 5 is Derek Carr. This is somebody I was pretty high on to start the year. Probably higher than most people. And he's somebody I'd like for DFS this week. If you saw my video last week, I did talk about him there a little bit. Didn't end up playing him myself, kind of kicking my butt for not doing so. But he completed 22 out of 30 of his 31 passes. 347 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 1 yard rushing. 29.98 fantasy points. He looked really good against Kansas City. Not too much else to say there. He's been very efficient this year. This was his first interception of the year. So he's definitely somebody you can play on bye weeks. He's definitely somebody you can stream in decent matchups as well. The other notable performances, Kyler Murray had a big game against the Jets. Over 300 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown as well. And then Ben Roethlisberger, he had 3 passing touchdowns in total. I believe about 230 yards or so. Teddy Bridgewater had a pretty good game against Atlanta. Atlanta's defense is pretty bad though. 2 passing touchdowns there as well. Then Gardner Minshew had a pretty good game against the Texans defense as well. 2 touchdowns, over 300 yards. Pretty good overall. So if you're looking at teams to stream against, the Falcons and the Texans are definitely 2 good ones. Then we'll move over to running back. So it's a little bit lower week at running back. There's good performances, but there's no like way over the top performances, at least so far this week. So we have Mike Davis coming in number 1, 89 yards rushing, 9 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown there. 29.9 fantasy points. These are all going to be PPR format, so full point PPR. If you guys play in a format that's a little bit different than that, it will change this ranking a little bit to adjust accordingly. Todd Gurley had a very good game against the poor Carolina Panthers run defense. 121 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He even caught 4 passes in this one for 29 yards. Good to see him getting involved in the passing game. We'll have to see if they use him any differently at all now that Dan Quinn's fired. I'm not expecting major changes in Atlanta, at least on offense. Looks like Raheem Morris is actually going to take over as the head coach. A little bit different than we expected. He has been a head coach before, been a couple years ago probably now. I believe that was down in Tampa Bay. He was really young at that time, if I remember correctly, and it didn't work out too well. But maybe as an interim coach here, he could be all right. He had been their defensive coordinator. The defense has been struggling this year. But he came in as defensive coordinator last year when their defense was struggling and kind of turned it around a little bit. Then we had Miles Sanders. He had 80 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 19 yards, 23.9 fantasy points. He played against Pittsburgh. This was a matchup that I wasn't really comfortable starting Miles Sanders in. It kind of worked out, but it's kind of lucky more than anything, honestly. One of his carries he broke off for 74 yards and a touchdown. If he doesn't have that, Then he had like 10 carries for 6 yards and the touchdown, and then he was pretty inefficient otherwise. So Pittsburgh's still not a team that you want to run your running back against, really. Next up, we got Ezekiel Elliott, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 reception for 14 yards, 23.5 fantasy points. So the big news yesterday, obviously, was Dak Prescott got injured. He broke and like dislocated his ankle, compound fracture there. He actually had surgery last night. So he's going to be gone for the rest of the year. Andy Dalton steps in at quarterback now. We'll have to see if they throw the ball as much as they've been doing or if they try to rely on the running game some more. If they rely on the running game some more, Ezekiel Elliott is definitely going to get a boost for the rest of the season. Then we got Josh Jacobs, 77 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 8 yards, 22.5 fantasy points. Honestly, he was pretty bad yesterday. He kind of lucked into two short yardage touchdowns that really helped out his day. Without that, he is pretty irrelevant. Then the other notable performances that we had, Darrell Henderson, I believe he had about 30-some yards rushing, 30-some yards receiving, but he did get in for 2 touchdowns. I just got finished doing the snap counts for yesterday's games this morning. He led the backfield in snap rate percentage, barely over Malcolm Brown. I know Akers played a little bit at the end of the game, had one nice run, but it looks like Henderson's still going to be the lead back for now, but it's a 3-back committee. He's more like a bye-week filler than anything at this point. You probably can't rely on him week in and week out, but he has performed pretty nicely overall this season. Then we got Alexander Mattison. Dalvin Cook got hurt last night. I believe it was a groin injury, so it's probably nothing that keeps him out long term, but Madison came in, performed nicely. I believe he had 112 yards rushing. It looked really good. I've been saying it for a while now. I don't know why they paid Dalvin Cook, because Alexander Madison's probably 95% as good as Dalvin Cook, honestly. If something ever does happen to Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison can step in and be great. Then we had Ronald Jones over 100 yards again. And last but not least that we want to mention is Raheem Mostert. He had about 90 yards rushing. Didn't carry the ball too often. That game was kind of a blowout by the end of it anyways. He only played on about 48% of the snaps. But it's good to see him come back healthy and perform. So he should be good to go going forward for you guys. Then we're going to get into wide receivers. Who would have guessed that the top 2 names would be Chase Claypool and Travis Fulgham? Chase Claypool saw 11 targets, caught 7 of them for 110 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also carried the ball 3 times, which was kind of interesting. He got 6 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown as well. Ended up with 42.6 fantasy points. This is a guy that I'm kind of kicking myself on. I was going to play him in DFS. We ended up going with McCole Hardman instead. I'm like, well, maybe Claypool does all right this game. But then I'm like, well, Hardman only needs 1 big play to pay off in DFS. And then Claypool went off and had this day. I know Deontay Johnson got hurt, so that obviously helped him out quite a bit. We'll have to see how bad Deontay Johnson's injury is as well, but Claypool's definitely going to be one of the top waiver wire pickups after this big breakout performance. Next up, we got Travis Fulgham. And you guys probably are going to say, who the heck is that? Honestly. And I don't blame you. Honestly, last week, I believe, was his first NFL game. He played all right. Like, he wasn't a big part of the offense at all. But then yesterday, he saw 13 targets, caught 10 of them, 152 yards and a touchdown. So, obviously, Carson Wentz likes him. I honestly didn't expect this from him. I watched his tape coming out of, I believe, his Old Dominion. He looked all right, but he was going against lesser competition. And he was on the Lions. The Lions cut him. The Packers picked him up. The Packers cut him. And then the Eagles picked him up. So, he's not somebody I expect a lot out of going forward. Alshon Jeffrey's coming back. Sean Jackson's going to be back as well. You could probably pick him up, stash him, see if he does anything. But I'm not expecting too much from him the rest of the season. Then if you look down below, we got Brandon Cooks. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think I just copy and pasted the stat line because he had 13 targets, 10 receptions, 152 yards, and a touchdown as well. I don't know what the odds of that are, but it's probably not that good. Brandon Cooks looked more involved in the offense with Bill O'Brien gone now. It's good to see. Will Fuller was still effective today as well. So if they kind of got that 1-2 punch going down there, and both these guys can get rolling, definitely is good signs for Deshaun Watson. It's definitely a good sign for both Cooks and Fuller, because then defenses have to respect both of them. Another thing to keep in mind was that he was playing with that quad injury to start the year too. He's starting to look fully healthy now, so as long as he stays healthy, he might be worth a wide receiver 3 or a flex spot. And then we got Adam Thielen. He's somebody I'd liked a lot this week, honestly. I know everybody's kind of on the Justin Jefferson train. I thought Jefferson would have a decent game too, but I thought Thielen was going to have the bigger game of the two. And I kind of was right in that regard. He saw 13 targets, caught 9 of them, 80 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. He also had 1 carry for 3 yards, 29.3 fantasy points, so a solid overall day for him. I know there's some people that are trying to knock Adam Thielen early in the year. Like, I'm in a lot of groups, like, for fantasy football on Twitter and stuff like that, and there's people that are trying to knock Thielen. I'm like, he's had 1 bad game. He's going to be a top 12 wide receiver at the end of the year. He's a solid guy that's not going to kill you every week. Like some people are just so picky, and they want their guy to have 100 yards and have 2 touchdowns every single week. It's not realistic. So when you're playing fantasy football, you got to be realistic. That's enough of that little tangent, though. DK Metcalf comes in 5th, 11 targets, caught 6 of them, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27.3 fantasy points. He got the 2 late touchdowns. That definitely helped out his day. He's been pretty solid so far. Both the wide receivers in Seattle have been good, him and Lockett. Lockett, I know, has had a little bit quieter weeks the last 2 weeks, but he'll be fine. He's obviously Russell Wilson's favorite target anyways. Then other notable performance was CeeDee Lamb. He looked real good again. Jamison Crowder over 100 yards and a touchdown, even with Joe Flacco, so you can feel confident starting him even if Flacco starts again next week. And then Darius Slayton was over 100 yards against the Cowboys. Was a good matchup for him, but nice to see him perform in a good matchup as well. Then we move over to tight ends. Once again, tight ends has kind of been the crap show. If you look at the numbers here, they might not look awful, but there's very few tight ends that actually panned out yesterday. So first one we got is Travis Kelce, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 108 yards, 1 touchdown, 24.8 fantasy points. So this was a pretty solid day overall. Can't knock him at all for this. Travis Kelce is somebody you're playing every week regardless. And it's nice to see him get you this kind of performance, especially when tight ends has been so bad the last couple of weeks. It's nice to know that you have somebody that's going to produce week in and week out. Mark Andrews. I kind of knocked him a little bit last week because he didn't see as many targets. But today he got 9 targets, 6 receptions, 56 yards, 1 touchdown. 17.6 fantasy points. So he had a solid day overall. It was a pretty good matchup for him against the Bengals as well. He's a guy that you're going to be starting week in and week out regardless. But there's going to be some weeks where he's not going to help you as much, but there's definitely weeks that he's going to be one of the top tight ends, most of the other weeks at least. Darren Waller. He's probably tight end number 3 for me right now. If after you get past Kittle and Kelce, Waller is up there because he's playing on a bunch of snaps, over 90% like in every game. He's getting targets, and he's like the main option in their offense, honestly. So he's a guy, like, if I'm going out and I'm trying to get a tight end, I'm trying to get Darren Waller because I don't think you're going to be able to get Kelce or Kittle without giving up a lot. But maybe you can get Waller a little bit cheaper. Some people might still think of him as like the tight end number 5. But he had 7 targets, 5 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown today. And 15.8 fantasy points. Like I said, he's pretty safe play overall. Then we got Mike Gesicki next, who, honestly, this was a weird game for him. He saw 6 targets, caught 5 of them, had 91 yards receiving. So we see his athletic ability come out here. He had 15.1 fantasy points. It was a pretty good game. Didn't get the touchdown. It's kind of interesting, though, because he only played on 45% of snaps. They're not really using him as a blocking tight end. That's kind of been a theme this year. But when they need him as a receiver, he's been all right. He's just been real hit or miss, though. And this probably wasn't his best matchup for him, but he paid off, and I can't say too much bad about him, honestly. Then we got Darren Fells. We're coming in 5th place here. This kind of shows how bad the tight end position was this week. He saw 2 targets, caught 2 of them, 57 yards and a touchdown. He ended up with 13.7 fantasy points, so he's just the boom-bust tight end guy. He's somebody I think I did talk about in my live stream yesterday. With Jordan Akins out, maybe you could play him, but he's completely touchdown reliant, and that's how it ended up being. He got the touchdown, so he paid off. Other notable performances from this past week. Like I said, tight end was pretty bad as well. So Austin Hooper's the other one. He saw 10 targets. He caught 5 of them, I believe 57 yards. No touchdowns. But he's kind of a guy, I've never been the biggest Austin Hooper fan. He's a slightly above average tight end. But if he's getting this type of volume, he's definitely somebody you can pick up and play like in a good matchup. He's probably a low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 at this point. But somebody to keep an eye out for if he's available in your league. But with that being said, these are the top 5 performers from each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end for week 5 through the Sunday night game. If there's any other top performers that you guys thought should have been on these lists, just let me know, especially in the other notable performance category. And if you let me also know you guys' thoughts on these players going forward, like I said, there's probably a couple of them that will be available on waivers. We'll be talking about them tomorrow on the waiver wire video as well. But with that being said, if you guys liked and enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. And with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber who has yet to do so, also hit that notification bell. It will let you know every single time I post up a new video. If you guys are unfamiliar with my channel, I put up 5 videos a week and then generally a live stream on Sunday if I'm able to do so. But with that being said, if you guys need to reach out to me at all for any reason, whether it's trade advice, waiver wire advice, who should I start, sit, anything like that, you can reach out to me either in the comments, at my email, coachcraigsports@gmail.com, on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, or on the Coach Craig Sports Facebook page. Keep in mind, I also write articles for the Podcastic Network. We got a great team over there. We're putting out articles all the time, start sits for the week, and other articles that we each write as well. But with that being said, that's all I got for today. Hope you guys all enjoyed, and have a great rest of your day.